Stories Between Us anthology, where Black queer men's lives, love, and tension take center stage. Firehouse 44 sits 3 blocks from the water, a low concrete building that always smells faintly of salt and diesel. And tonight, it exhales heat through every open bay as Engine 3 and Ladder 2 settle back into their stalls after a residential fire that burned fast. The trucks are still ticking as they cool outside, metal contracting in soft pops. While inside the station, the men move into the narrow tiled corridor that leads to the showers, carrying smoke on their skin like a second uniform. The shower room is already fogging up when Lieutenant Owen Cole steps inside, lieutenant of Firehouse 44, respected, controlled, and practiced at keeping his attention where it belongs. Griffin Walker was a new transfer to their station, competent and unassuming, and already requiring more awareness than Lieutenant Owen prefers to give. Steam rises from the drains and curls against the ceiling in slow, lazy sheets. Water pounds against tile from several open stalls, loud enough to flatten conversation into background noise. The fluorescent lights overhead blur at the edges, softened by moisture, turning hard surfaces pale and indistinct. Lieutenant Owen removes his helmet first, then his gloves, then his jacket, folding each piece the same way every time before placing it on the wooden bench that runs the length of the wall. He loosens the straps at his shoulders, slides out of his turnout pants, and steps free of them without hurry. There is nothing casual about how he undresses. Every movement is deliberate, measured, exact, as if his body is still following instructions that were written years ago and never revised. He's tall, broad through the chest, solid through the legs, built from repetition and load-bearing labor. Old burn scars ladder across his forearms in pale, uneven lines. His hands are large and blunt at the knuckles, steady even now, even with adrenaline still humming low in his blood. He does not look for Griffin. He never looks for anyone. Griffin Walker enters the shower room with his turnout coat unzipped and hanging loose from one shoulder, smoke darkening the edges of the fabric. His long locks have slipped free from their tie during the call, heavy with water and ash, trailing down his back in thick ropes that cling to his skin. Droplets slide from their ends and strike the tile in soft, irregular taps. Griffin lets the heat work its way out of his muscles, aware of the room and acutely aware of Lieutenant Owen Cole in it. He respects his lieutenant's control, the way he commands space without raising his voice, and he tells himself that the pull he feels is only trust, only professional gravity. For now, that explanation is enough to stand under. Griffin's body carries heat differently. Where Lieutenant Owen holds his tension inward, Griffin lets it move through him. His shoulders roll once, slow and loose, working the last stiffness out of his muscles. His breathing is deep and unguarded. His skin glows warm under the fluorescent lights, marked only by a faint red bruise along his ribs where debris pressed too close before they pulled clear. Griffin peels off his jacket, then his shirt, tugging damp fabric over his head and dropping it to the bench. His torso is lean and strong, defined without looking carved, muscle shaped by motion rather than display. A thin line of hair runs down his stomach. Sweat still traces the shallow dip between his shoulder blades. Lieutenant Owen becomes aware of him the way he becomes aware of changing wind on a fire ground. Not all at once, but through small, undeniable signals that gather into certainty. The sound of Griffin's breathing. The quiet slide of Griffin's bare foot as he shifted his stance under the water. the soft drag of wet locks against skin. He registers each detail automatically, clinically, and then feels something move out of place inside his chest when his attention does not return to neutral. They choose adjacent shower stalls without discussion. Water crashes down around them, turning the room into a chamber of white noise. Lieutenant Owen steps under the spray and tilts his head forward, letting heat and ash rinse from his hairline and beard. Water runs down the hard planes of his shoulders, along the grooves of old scars, over the dense muscle of his back. Through the veil of steam, he becomes aware of the outline of Griffin's body in the next stall. Griffin stands with his head tipped back, eyes closed, water striking his face and chest, his locks darkening further as they soak through. He reaches up to gather them, twisting them once, wringing water from their ends before letting them fall again against his collarbone. Lieutenant Owen does not mean to watch him, but he can't stop looking. Griffin's mouth parts slightly under the spray. His throat moves when he swallows. His chest rises and falls in an easy rhythm that suggests safety rather than vigilance. Lieutenant Owen has spent most of his adult life keeping his shoulders tight and his feet planted as if the ground might give way beneath him. Being a firefighter teaches you to stay braced for panic and uncertainty. Standing beside Griffin, he notices how he holds his body, how he clenches his stomach and wonders how much work it must take to stay that way. Lieutenant Owen lifts his head and meets Griffin's eyes through the steam. For a moment that feels longer than it is. They simply look at each other. Water beats down against tile. Pipes knock softly behind the walls. The rest of the fire station fades around them. Griffin stands bare and unguarded beneath the water, his long locks hanging loose against his shoulders, darkened and heavy with water. Lieutenant Owen registers the slope of his chest, the way exhaustion has softened him rather than stripped him down. He realizes with a quiet jolt that looking like this feels intimate in a way he has been trained not to allow. Griffin's gaze flickers down, tracing Lieutenant Owen's face. There is awe there, the kind that arrives before thought and lingers after sense tries to catch up. Griffin shifts his stance slightly, water sliding along his shoulders, and breaks their silence. I can't believe how fast that fire moved. I've been replaying the moment the ceiling fell, trying to figure out how we all walked out of that. Lieutenant Owen nods once, eyes still on him. It shouldn't have burned the way it did, he answers. Everything about it was off. One bad minute and the whole place could have come down on us. Griffin exhales, the sound low and slow under the water. Lieutenant Owen watches water track down Griffin's chest. That's the kind of fire that stays with you, Lieutenant Owen says. For a moment, it feels possible that the space between them might fade, but neither of them takes the bait. A voice echoes down the corridor outside the showers, calling for someone. Lieutenant Owen reaches for the metal handle and turns the water off. Steam hangs between them, thick and unfinished, holding the shape of what did not happen. The closeness dissolves into something more work-related as the moment ends. By mid-morning the next day, the street looks ordinary again. Traffic moves through the intersection in short, impatient waves. A woman walks her dog past the yellow tape as if it has always been there. The sky is clean and pale, rinsed clear of last night's smoke. Only the building is left to tell the story. It was a 3-story walk-up that once held families, now stripped down to scorched brick, warped door frames, and rooms opened by force when the fire tore through faster than anyone expected. Lieutenant Owen stands at the curb as the crew steps off the truck with flashlights, pry bars, and handheld meters, tools meant not for rescue but for confirmation. The fire is out, but the danger is not. This is how they make sure the building will not reignite, how they check for heat buried in walls, weakened beams that could still give way, and pockets of smoke that can flare without warning. Griffin steps down from the engine behind him, helmet tucked under one arm, locks pulled back again into a tight tie at the nape of his neck. In daylight, the bruise along his ribs shows more clearly, a dull bloom beneath his skin. Lieutenant Owen notices the scar along Griffin's side, the faint discoloration left by something that once pressed hard and long enough to leave a record. He has always paid attention to marks like that, the kind that tell you a man has been tested and remains standing. They cross the street together. The entrance yawns open, warped by heat, door hanging crooked on its hinge. Inside, the air is cooler, heavy with moisture. Ash coats the floor in soft gray drifts that erase the sharpness of sound. Their boots leave prints immediately. Lieutenant Owen leads out of habit. Griffin follows without being told. They move through rooms that no longer belong to anyone. A child's sneaker sits alone near the wall, half-melted, toe curled in. A kitchen chair lies on its side like it fell slowly and never got up again. The ceiling above the living room sags, patched with fresh boards that look too clean for the damage they cover. Lieutenant Owen raises his hand once, and Griffin stops. They stand there, shoulder to shoulder, as Lieutenant Owen points out the weakened beam where the fire burned hottest, and the floor beneath it has begun to give. As he speaks, one of the men behind them steps forward without looking. The floor drops, wood snaps sharp and loud, a sudden hollow crack, and the floorboards give way in a rush of dust and broken plaster. A section of the floor collapses into the unit below, air rushing upward as debris disappears. Griffin reacts quickly. His hand grabs the back of Lieutenant Owen's coat and yanks him hard, dragging him backward as the floor collapses exactly where Lieutenant Owen had been standing. Lieutenant Owen stumbles into Griffin's chest, boots scraping, his heart jumping, whether from the collapsing floor or from Griffin's quick hands. He isn't sure. For a second, the room is silent. Dust fills the air, thick enough to taste. Someone mutters a curse under their breath. Another guy lets out a laugh that's too loud and a second too late, the kind that only shows up after you realize you're still alive. Lieutenant Owen steadies himself, one hand still lifted, Griffin's grip firm at his back. The contact lasts a beat longer than necessary before Griffin lets go. They clear the scene and call it in, standing back while additional crews and inspectors take over what they've broken open. The tension drains off slowly as the danger moves out of their hands. Back at Firehouse 44, the crew eats late. Paper plates, greasy food, boots still on, laughing too loud, replaying the near miss like a story that already belongs to the past. The station settles one body at a time until only Lieutenant Owen and Griffin are the only ones remaining. Griffin notices the smudge first, a thin gray streak left behind along Lieutenant Owen's cheekbone. A spot left untouched from Lieutenant Owen's shower when he returned earlier. Up close, Lieutenant Owen smells like smoke pressed deep into cotton, clean soap underneath it, and the dry salt of sweat. It should be familiar to Griffin by now. Griffin hesitates. Lieutenant Owen is his lieutenant, the man who assigns his shifts, the man whose name carries weight in rooms. Griffin is still learning how to stand in. The man who did not move when the floor dropped away. Griffin steps closer anyway. "You have ash on your face," he says quietly. Lieutenant Owen does not answer. He knows he should step back. He knows he should make a joke or give an order, but he does none of those things. "Hold still," Griffin says. Lieutenant Owen feels the choice happening inside him before he makes it. He thinks about his rank. He thinks about the crew upstairs who might see them. He thinks about how easy it would be to end this by backing up half a step. But he stays where he is. Griffin's thumb touches his cheek. The contact is careful, almost respectful, but it is not hesitant. He wipes the smudge away slowly, his knuckle grazing Lieutenant Owen's jaw, his palm hovering close enough for them to feel each other. Lieutenant Owen hates how much his body tells the truth. He begins to rise in ways he wished he could control. Griffin's hand does not fall when the mark is gone. His thumb rests there, firm now, deliberate, as if he is claiming the space he has already entered. Lieutenant Owen looks at him. "You should not be doing this," he says. Griffin does not move his hand. "I know," he says. The garage door of the firehouse motor hums behind them, metal rolling down a few inches before stopping, loud in the quiet, a reminder of how visible they are and how close they are. Griffin lowers his hand fast. Voices follow, loose and loud. A few members of the crew coming back through the open garage, jackets slung over their shoulders, laughter rolling in ahead of them. The door finishes lifting as they pass beneath it. Light and noise spilling into the space. Griffin steps back first. Lieutenant Owen does the same. By the time the men reach them, the distance is already in place. Both of them turn the right way, their faces set into something neutral and workable, as if nothing at all had been happening there. The moment folds itself away. The call comes in just after dark, when the water has gone black and the docks have thinned out to security lights and the low grind of generators. A warehouse at the edge of the port, stacked with pallets and solvents, smoke already visible from the access road. The wind is up, pulling hard off the water. Lieutenant Owen rides the front seat, radio pressed close to his mouth, listening as dispatch list hazards in clipped bursts. He pictures the place before he sees it. Long, open interior, high ceiling, too many ways for heat to hide. Lieutenant Owen issues assignments to his crew in clipped, even sentences, addressing the crew as a unit. He does not single Griffin out by name because he already knows Griffin will take the hardest position without being told. They arrive at the scene into noise and motion. Forklifts abandoned at angles, a supervisor shouting over the wind, flames licking along the dockside wall where the fire has found something eager to burn. The smell is sharper here, chemical, bitter, stinging at the eyes. Griffin works the line like it is an extension of his body, helmet down, locks secured tight at the nape. He moves with the same calm Lieutenant Owen clocked in daylight, only faster now, more focused. They cross paths twice without stopping. Inside, the heat behaves the wrong way. It stays trapped near the floor instead of rising, rolling forward in heavy waves before lifting all at once. Lieutenant Owen feels the pressure shift through his boots and chest before he sees it. The kind of change that means the room is about to turn. He calls for an immediate pullback. The radio spits static. The response comes a beat too late. A pallet stack collapses near the loading bay. The sound is sudden and heavy. Flames surge sideways, chasing oxygen. Griffin is positioned near the loading bay, braced against the hose line as he pivots on Lieutenant Owen's call. At the same time, a metal bracket breaks loose from the storage rack overhead. It clips Griffin across the shoulder and ribs as he turns, just enough force to knock him half a step off balance. Griffin drops to one knee under the impact, breath knocked short but controlled. He does not shout, and he keeps his grip on the hose, knuckles locked as he steadies himself. Lieutenant Owen is already moving towards him. He reaches Griffin as the heat surges again, grabs the back of his turnout coat, and drags him out of the line of fire into the space they just forced open. Lieutenant Owen steps between Griffin and the flame without hesitation, one arm extended to shield, the other tight across Griffin's back, the shock of contact driving hard through his own shoulder. Luckily, they make it out together. Outside, the air hits hard and cold. Griffin bends forward, hands on his thighs, breathing shallow. Lieutenant Owen keeps his grip until he feels Griffin steady, then loosens it by inches, unwilling to let go all at once. "Sit here," Lieutenant Owen says. The medic is already there, cutting tape, checking vitals. Griffin answers every question clearly. He insists he is fine. The medic does not agree. They peel back the coat enough to see the bruise blooming fast and dark, swelling under the ribs. When the medic says he needs to go to the hospital now, Lieutenant Owen does not hesitate. He turns, calls another lieutenant by name, and hands off command in the same breath. Griffin starts to protest, shaking his head, saying, Lieutenant Owen does not need to ride with him, but Lieutenant Owen is already stepping into the ambulance, already making the decision final. Inside the ambulance, Griffin looks up at him, eyes clear despite the pain he was in. "You pulled me clean out the line of fire back there," Griffin says. Lieutenant Owen smiles. "You did the same for me before," he says. The ambulance lurches into motion. Lieutenant Owen braces himself against the bench as the doors slam shut, sirens rising, red light washing over metal and glass. As the medic works, Lieutenant Owen notices a smear of dirt along Griffin's cheek, a faint mark left behind by the building. Without speaking, Lieutenant Owen reaches out and wipes it away with his thumb, slow and careful. Griffin stills under the touch, watching him, the moment feeling contained as the city blurs past the rear doors. Inside the ambulance, the night stretches open, long and unfinished, as they ride toward the hospital together. The hospital room is quiet in the way only hospitals are quiet, filled with small mechanical sounds that stand in for breathing when people are trying to sleep. A monitor blinks beside the bed. A bag of clear fluid moves slowly through its line. The lights are dimmed, but not off, leaving everything soft and exposed at the same time. Griffin lies still beneath thin white sheets. One arm is wrapped in gauze. The other rests at his side, heavy with the dull weight of medication. Lieutenant Owen sits in the chair beside the bed with his jacket still on. He has not taken it off. His helmet is on the floor between his boots. His hands rest on his knees, open, empty, disciplined into stillness. His eyes stay on Griffin's face, tracking every shift in breath, every small movement under the skin. Time has passed. Enough for the adrenaline to drain. Enough for the fear to settle. Griffin stirs awake. Lieutenant Owen stands immediately. He moves to the side of the bed without rushing, the way he moves when something matters too much to be careless with. Lieutenant Owen speaks before Griffin can try to understand on his own. "You are in the hospital," he says. "You had internal bleeding, so they operated. But you are stable now. You are going to recover." Griffin's chest settles into a steady rise and fall, the shock easing without panic as he focuses on the simple fact of being alive. "The nurse asked if there was anyone they should call, Lieutenant Owen," he says. "There was no one listed on your paperwork." Griffin looks at the ceiling. "My parents stopped speaking to me when I was younger," Griffin continues. "They told me I could come home when I learned how to live correctly. I did not go back." Lieutenant Owen listens without moving, careful not to interrupt, aware that this is the closest he has come to understanding Griffin beyond the job. "I have a sister," Griffin says. "We talk once or twice a year. She does not ask questions I do not want to answer. I do not ask her for anything. The firehouse is the closest thing I have to family now," he says. Griffin looks at Lieutenant Owen. "What about you? Got a wife and kids hiding somewhere?" he asks. Lieutenant Owen goes quiet, but he does not look away. "This job is the only place my life makes sense," he says. "It gives me order. It gives me rules. Rules mean I know what I'm supposed to do when everything else falls apart. It gives me a reason to show up even when I do not want to be anywhere." Griffin watches him closely, still and attentive. "I was engaged once," Lieutenant Owen says. "His name was Clinton." Griffin keeps his face composed, absorbing the confirmation that the attention he felt from Lieutenant Owen was not imagined. Lieutenant Owen explains that it was a kitchen fire, the kind that starts small and consumes a space in minutes. He tells Griffin the smoke took over their apartment fast, that the firefighters reached Clinton only after there was nothing left to save. "I joined the fire department because I was angry," Lieutenant Owen says, "because it was the only way I knew how to work through what happened, and somewhere in that, I fell in love with the job." Griffin listens to Lieutenant Owen finish. He does not look away when Lieutenant Owen talks about Clinton. He stays present, taking in the raspy sound of Lieutenant Owen's voice, the vulnerability of him standing here saying something this personal out loud. It changes how Griffin sees him. Somewhere in the quiet that follows, without either of them noticing it happen, their hands find each other at the edge of the bed. Lieutenant Owen's fingers curl around Griffin's, slow and instinctive, like his body remembers this feeling. Griffin watches Lieutenant Owen's face as their hands settle together, the small tension at his jaw, the way his shoulders ease a fraction in spite of himself. This is the man who runs into burning buildings. This is the man who learned how to survive after the death of his fiancée. All of a sudden, the hospital room door swings open. Noise rushes in with it. Too much energy for a hospital room. 3 guys from the fire station spill inside at once, loud and careless in the way men get when fear has already passed. There he is. "Man, you scared the hell out of us. You look like shit, bro." Lieutenant Owen and Griffin separate immediately. Their hands drop and distance returns. Lieutenant Owen steps back into his position of lieutenant without thinking. Griffin leans into the pillows, already rearranging his face into something neutral. The crew crowds the foot of the bed, talking over each other, relief disguised as jokes. Lieutenant Owen stays near the wall. Griffin glances at him one more time before changing his focus to the guys. Months later, the men are gathered around the television in the common room, boots half-laced, jackets draped over chairs, coffee going untouched as the volume creeps higher on its own. The screen shows a satellite view of the coast, a massive storm spinning with slow certainty, bands tightening, the projected path narrowing until it points directly at the city. A banner scrolls along the bottom of the screen. Hurricane warning upgraded. Time has passed since the dock fire. Enough for bruises to fade. Enough for routines to settle back into place. Enough for Lieutenant Owen and Griffin to learn how to exist in the same spaces without drawing attention to themselves. They have learned where cameras do not reach, how long a touch can last before it becomes noticeable, how to kiss quickly, pressed into the shadow of an open area or the back of a truck, hands low and quiet, urgency kept in check by discipline. Griffin stands near Lieutenant Owen now, close enough to feel his body next to him. He knows the way Lieutenant Owen smells when he is focused. Musk and engine oil, the faint trace of cologne worn sparingly. He knows how Lieutenant Owen's posture changes when responsibility is called upon. He has learned all of this without being taught. On the screen, a meteorologist points to evacuation zones. The room hums with low commentary. Someone makes a joke that lands flat. Someone else starts checking their phone. Lieutenant Owen's phone rings. He steps away from the group without, moving toward the edge of the room where the sound drops just enough to hear himself think. He answers, listens, nods once, even though no one can see him. The mayor's voice is clear and direct. The city is forming a hurricane task force. They need someone to coordinate the field response across departments. Someone with experience, someone who people trust. Lieutenant Owen does not hesitate to accept the task. When he ends the call and turns back toward the room, the shift is immediate. It moves through him like a switch thrown. His shoulders square. His expression settles into something precise. He speaks to the room, voice even, controlled, already assigning prep tasks, staging plans, coverage zones. The men respond without question, moving instinctively, the way they always do when Lieutenant Owen takes command. This is where he belongs. Griffin watches it happen, mesmerized by how Lieutenant Owen leads without raising his voice, how his strength sits quiet in his body, solid and unshowy, impossible not to want. He feels the familiar mix rise in his chest, pride and want all at the same time. The stolen nights between them, these last few months coming back to him in flashes. Lieutenant Owen's hand firm on his butt cheeks, the way he never lingers afterward longer than he should, the way he kisses him on the forehead before walking out the door. Griffin had hoped time might change that. Instead, time has taught him how easily Lieutenant Owen can step into something bigger and leave everything else unaddressed. Their eyes meet across the room. Just for a moment, Lieutenant Owen gives a small gesture, a look meant to reassure Griffin, meant to say that duty was calling. On the television, the forecast updates. The storm has strengthened. Landfall is projected sooner than expected. Outside, the bay doors begin to lower, metal rolling down with a finality that carries through the building. Radios crackle, engines come to life. The firehouse shifts fully into motion. Lieutenant Owen stands at the center of it, fielding questions, making decisions, becoming exactly who the city needs him to be. Griffin moves with the others, pulling on his jacket, checking his gear, folding his wants back into the place he has learned to keep them. The storm is coming, and so is the moment when staying quiet will no longer be enough. The storm arrives fast. Rain cuts sideways across the streets, driven hard by wind that howls through intersections and empty storefronts. Power flickers block by block, entire neighborhoods dropping into darkness while emergency lights smear red and blue across flooded pavement. Sirens overlap and disappear. Radios crackle, cut out, and come back on again. Firehouse 44 is already in motion. Engines roll out one by one, tires cutting through water that climbs higher by the minute. Inside the command vehicle, Lieutenant Owen stands over a spread of maps and live updates, headset pressed tight to one ear, voice steady as everything else strains. He speaks clearly, decisively, moving resources where they are needed most. There is no hesitation in him now. This is the work. This is where he has always been strongest. Griffin moves through the chaos with the others, rain slicking his jacket, helmet strapped down, body tuned to the urgency of the moment. He listens for Lieutenant Owen's voice the way he always has, letting it orient him, letting it cut through noise and doubt. The final call comes from a low-lying residential block where water has risen faster than expected. A structure has shifted on its foundation. People are still inside. Access is narrowing. Lieutenant Owen hears the update and responds immediately, assigning units, adjusting routes as streets disappear underwater. Then the channel opens again, urgent now, conditions changing faster than planned. Lieutenant Owen makes the call. "Griffin, take point on the interior," he says into the radio. The rescue is hard and close and exhausting. Water pushes against doors. Floors give under weight. Hands reach out in panic, but their efforts hold and people are pulled free. Bodies are counted and moved into safety. By the time the wind begins to ease, everyone is soaked through and shaking with fatigue. As dawn presses slowly against the sky, fire engines return to Firehouse 44 one by one, mud-streaked and quiet. The bay doors lift and lower. Men move without talking much now, too tired for noise, relief settling in where adrenaline has burned out. Outside, the city looks battered, but still standing. Lieutenant Owen steps out of the command vehicle and removes his headset. His hands tremble slightly before he stills them. He takes a breath and lets it out slowly, aware in a way he has not been before of how close everything came. Griffin stands near the edge of the open bay, helmet off, rain still clinging to his jacket and hair. Lieutenant Owen sees him immediately as he steps down from the command vehicle, his attention locking in without hesitation. He moves toward Griffin with purpose, cutting across the concrete as if the rest of the firehouse has fallen away. He stops in front of him, close enough to matter. "I did not think this was still possible for me," he says. His voice is stripped of command. "After Clinton died, I believed that part of my life ended with him. I thought surviving was enough." Griffin listens without interrupting, a little startled as he takes in the words he's saying. "Tonight," Lieutenant Owen continues, "with the water rising and people holding on to whatever they could, I realized I have been alive for a long time without letting myself want anything." He looks directly at Griffin. "I do not want to reach the end of my life having only been good at saving others," he says. "I do not want to die without trying to love again." The words land plain and unguarded. "You make me want to try," Lieutenant Owen says. The sky above them clears enough for the moon to break through thinning clouds, pale and steady. A few stars push into view, faint but real. Griffin steps closer, He reaches for Lieutenant Owen's hand with the firehouse behind them and the rest of the crew tending to themselves inside. They kiss. They stood there together, hands joined. Two men still breathing, still standing, choosing something that might cost them and deciding it is worth the risk. The firehouse hums back to life around them. Griffin turns toward Lieutenant Owen fully now. "I want to try," he says. "Whatever this is, I want to give it a real chance." Lieutenant Owen squeezes Griffin's hand in agreement. The storm has passed, and something new has taken shape. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us Anthology. You can find every episode on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Rate the show and leave a comment. It helps more people find us.